hall was filled with laughter, but not the kind that warmed the heart. It was cruel, sharp, and heavy with mockery. Bright alien lights flashed across the room, showing cages lined against the walls, each filled with broken souls. Merchants and nobles of the alien city gathered, drinking and feasting, their eyes hungry not for food but for suffering. In the middle of it all stood the human, silent, his fists tight at his sides. He had been brought here as an outsider, someone they thought could be used for their games. To them, humans were strange, creatures of flesh and stubbornness, amusing at best, worthless at worst. They had already mocked him for being soft, for showing pity where they showed none. Now they wanted to push him further. "Bring it out," shouted one alien with a voice like cracking stone. The crowd cheered, stomping the floor, eager for what was coming. A cage door screeched open, and from inside, 2 guards dragged a small figure. It was a girl, an alien girl, frail, trembling. Her body scarred, her clothes torn to rags, her head hung low, her eyes empty. She stumbled, nearly falling, but the guards shoved her toward the human, laughing as if it were the greatest joke. "This," one of the nobles sneered, raising his glass, "is our gift to you, human. She is useless, broken, and worth nothing. But maybe she will entertain you for a while. Do with her as you please." The hall roared with cruel laughter. Some shouted suggestions too vile to speak. Others waved their hands as though tossing away trash. To them, she was not a person, not even a creature with life. She was entertainment. The human stared at her, his jaw tight. She was so thin it seemed a breath of wind might break her. Her legs shook as she tried to stand, her hands clutching the floor, her lips moving but no sound escaping. The aliens waited for his reaction, expecting him to shove her away. Maybe he would spit on her. Maybe he would laugh along with them. That was the game. Prove that he was no different from them. Prove that kindness was a weakness. But he did not laugh. He did not look away. Instead, he stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as though approaching something sacred. He bent down and knelt beside her, his hand reaching out not in cruelty but in care. The girl flinched, her shoulders rising as if she expected a strike. Her eyes, dim and afraid, lifted just enough to see him. For the first time, her broken body froze in shock, because his touch was gentle, his voice low. "You're safe," he whispered, words soft and calm. The crowd went silent for a moment, as if the entire hall had stopped breathing. Then a wave of mocking laughter burst out, even louder than before. "Safe?" one alien howled, spilling his drink. "He thinks she's safe." Others doubled over, slamming the table, mocking every word. But their noise could not change what she felt in that small moment. His hand, warm on her shoulder, steady and real. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since she had been taken, not since her life had been crushed. He looked back at the crowd, his eyes cold. "She's not your toy," he said firmly. The laughter turned into hisses, some aliens rising in anger. The guards looked uneasy, unsure if they should step forward or wait. One noble leaned forward, voice dripping with poison. "You dare refuse our gift, human? She is trash. She was meant to be thrown away. If you keep her, you will share her fate. Are you ready to risk your life for nothing?" The human stood, lifting the girl gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a shadow of what she should have been. Her breath trembled against his chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. He turned toward the exit, his back to the laughter. Every step he took was filled with silent defiance. Every step told them he was not playing their game, and the crowd grew restless, anger rising, whispers turning into threats. "Let him go," one alien finally said, a sly smile spreading across his face. "Let him take the broken thing. He will not last the night." The others laughed again, their cruel amusement restored. They believed the human had just chosen death for himself. But he did not care, for in his arms The girl's small fingers clutched weakly at his shirt, as, if she feared he might vanish, her lips moved again, and this time a faint whisper escaped. Why? He looked down at her, his voice steady. Because no one deserves to be treated like this. The doors closed behind them, the mocking laughter fading into the night. But danger had not faded. It had only begun. The human knew the moment he carried her away, the entire city would turn its eyes on him. Yet he did not stop. Because in that cruel gift, he had found something worth fighting for. The night air was cold, carrying the smell of dust and smoke from the alien city. The human walked through the empty streets, his arms holding the fragile alien girl close. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder, her breath shallow, almost silent. Every shadow seemed to watch him. Every corner whispered danger, because in this city, carrying her was not a kindness. It was defiance, and defiance always had a price. He reached the edge of the city where broken houses leaned against each other like tired bones. There, hidden in a forgotten alley, was his shelter, a small room with cracked walls, a single mat, a rusty lamp, and little else. But it was safer than the halls of cruelty he had just left behind. He set her down gently on the mat. She flinched, curling in on herself, her thin arms covering her face as though expecting another blow. He froze, his heart heavy, realizing she did not understand safety. She only understood pain. Easy, he whispered, his voice low, careful. No one will hurt you here. For a long moment she did not move. Then slowly she lowered her arms, her eyes meeting his. Her eyes were strange, a mix of silver and pale violet, glowing faintly in the lamplight. But they were empty, hollowed by years of suffering. He knelt beside her, pulling out a small piece of cloth and a bowl of water he had saved. Her wounds were raw, dirt and dried blood covering her skin. When he touched the cloth to her arm, she gasped, jerking away. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, holding the cloth back. "I won't hurt you, I promise." She blinked at him, confused. Promises meant nothing where she came from. But his eyes held no mockery, no hunger, no cruelty, just patience. After a long hesitation, she nodded faintly, allowing him to try again. He cleaned her wounds slowly, gently. Every time she winced, he paused, letting her breathe. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of dripping water. Finally, when he wrapped a piece of cloth around her arm as a bandage, she whispered, "Oh, why?" The same word she had spoken before, but now her voice carried more strength. He sat back, meeting her gaze. "Because you're alive," he answered simply. "And that is enough reason to be cared for." She stared at him, her lips trembling. No one had ever said such words to her. For so long she had been told she was worthless, less than dirt. Tears filled her eyes, but she turned her head away quickly, ashamed to cry. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small piece of bread, hard, rough, but all he had. He placed it beside her. "Eat," he said softly. Her hands shook as she reached for it. She ate quickly, almost desperately, like someone who had not known food in days. Watching her, he realized she probably hadn't. So he tore off another piece from his share and gave it to her. She looked at him in shock, as if she could not believe he would give away his own food. Why do you give me yours?" she whispered again. He smiled faintly. "Because you need it more than I do." For the first time, her lips curved, just barely, into something that was not fear, not a full smile, but a shadow of what it might become one day. The hours passed, the lamp flickering weakly. She lay down on the mat, still trembling. The human sat by the doorway, keeping watch. He knew the city would not forget what he had done. Somewhere out there, whispers were already spreading. The human had taken the broken girl, and the aliens who had mocked him would not let that insult pass. Her soft voice broke the silence again. "They will come," she said, her eyes half closed. He looked at her, his jaw tight. "Yes," he admitted, "they will come." She swallowed, fear rising again. "Then why keep me? You will suffer because of me." He shook his head. "No, little one, I will suffer if I throw you away." Her eyes widened slightly, her breath catching. No one had ever spoken of her like that. Like she was not a curse, but a choice. Slowly, her body relaxed, exhaustion pulling her down into sleep. Her small hand rested near his, as though reaching for him even in dreams. He stayed awake, guarding her. Every sound outside made his muscles tense. Every shadow made him wonder if they were already coming. But as he watched her sleep, he felt something stir inside him. Something he had not felt in a long time. It was not pity, and not duty. It was something stronger, a resolve, a fire. He would not let her be broken again. If they wanted to take her, they would have to take his life too. Outside, the city grew quieter. But in the silence, danger only thickened. The first night was not over, it was only the beginning. The first light of dawn crept into the broken shelter, soft and pale. The human sat against the wall, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but still awake. He had kept watch the entire night, every creak of wood, every echo outside making his hand tighten around the small knife he carried. The alien girl still slept on the mat, curled tightly as if afraid the world might snatch her away even in dreams. When she finally stirred, blinking slowly at the light, confusion crossed her face. For a moment she looked terrified, expecting chains, expecting shouting, expecting pain. But instead, she saw him sitting quietly nearby, his gaze calm, his presence steady. Her heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from not knowing what to feel. He smiled faintly. "Morning," he said, his voice low but warm. She opened her mouth as if to reply, then stopped. Words were not easy for her. Words had been beaten out of her for too long. Instead, she gave a tiny nod. The human rose and poured water from a cracked jug into a small cup. He handed it to her carefully. She hesitated, staring at it as if it might be a trick, but when she finally sipped, the cool liquid eased her dry throat. It was the first kindness of the day, and it felt strange, almost unreal. He then opened a small pouch, pulling out dried roots and bread. Not much, but enough for them to share. He pushed the larger piece toward her, keeping the smaller one for himself. Again, she stared at him, confusion flickering in her pale violet eyes. "No," she whispered weakly, "you need to." Her voice cracked, unused to speaking so many words at once. He shook his head firmly. "You need it more." She lowered her gaze, the weight of his choice pressing against her chest. For years, she had been told she was worth less than scraps. And now someone gave her his food as if her life mattered more than his hunger. As she ate slowly, carefully, he prepared a fresh cloth and checked her wounds. Some had already begun to dry, but others were raw and deep. He worked, gently, dipping the cloth in water and pressing it softly against her skin. She winced at the sting, a sharp hiss escaping her lips. But he murmured, "Almost done, just a little more, you're safe." Her breath came fast, her eyes darting to his hands. She had seen too many hands bring pain, but these hands were steady, careful, as if they feared breaking her even more. She whispered, "Why do you care?" the same question always haunting her. He paused, meeting her gaze. Because you're alive, he said again simply. And because someone has to. Her throat tightened, tears welling against her will. She turned her head, hiding her face with her hair, but he noticed and gently placed the cloth aside, giving her space. He did not force her to speak. He only stayed close, silent, but steady, like a wall she could lean on. As the morning grew, she tried to stand. Her legs trembled, almost giving way beneath her. The human quickly moved to steady her, holding her arms. Easy, he said. Take it slow. Her knees shook, but with his support, she managed to stand. For the first time in a long while, she was on her feet. Not as a toy, not as a prisoner, but as herself. She looked at him, breathless, her lips parting in something like disbelief. He gave a small nod of encouragement. You're stronger than you think, he whispered. Those words struck her deeply, because no one had ever told her she was strong. She had only been told she was broken, useless, weak. Now someone saw her differently, but outside the small shelter, danger stirred. Voices carried through the streets, whispers spreading. The human took her, some said. The broken girl. Others spat. He insults us by keeping trash alive. And a few whispered with unease. Maybe he sees something we do not. Inside, the girl pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Her eyes flickered with both fear and hope. She asked quietly, They will come, won't they? The human nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Yes, he said, but they will have to go through me first. Her chest tightened at those words. For the first time, she felt the faintest flicker of safety. Not because danger was gone, but because someone was willing to stand in its way for her. Later, as the sun rose higher, she sat quietly, watching him sharpen his knife. She noticed how tired he looked, the shadows under his eyes, the weight on his shoulders. Yet he had stayed, awake for her, guarded her, fed her, healed her. Her lips parted and she whispered something she had never said before. Thank you. The words were soft, almost broken, but they carried the strength of everything she had never been allowed to feel. He looked up, meeting her eyes, and gave a small smile. You don't need to thank me, he said, but I'm glad you did. For a long time, silence settled between them. Not heavy, but calm. It was the silence of two souls learning to breathe again. But as the day stretched on, the silence outside grew dangerous. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. The girl froze, her body tense. The human's hand tightened around his knife, his eyes narrowing. He knew this peace would not last. The healing had only begun, and the fight for it was coming. The day passed slowly, each hour heavy with unease. Inside the broken shelter, the human cleaned his small knife again and again, sharpening it though the blade was already sharp. The alien girl sat near the wall, knees to her chest, her pale violet eyes watching him. She could feel it, the storm building outside. Every shout in the street, every echo of boots, it made her body stiffen. By evening, the whispers had spread across the city. Every tavern, every marketplace, every corner where shadows gathered carried the same words. The human took her. The broken girl still lives. Some laughed with cruelty, mocking him as foolish. Others spat in anger, furious that their gift had been rejected. But a few, only a few, whispered differently. He stood against them, they said quietly. He carried her out as if she mattered. The whispers reached places the human could not see. They reached workers chained in the mines, slaves beaten in alleys, and servants forced to bow low. Among them the thought spread like a spark. If a stranger, a human, could defy the nobles for one broken girl, maybe hope was not fully dead, but hope was dangerous, and those in power hated it. That night, a group of 3 aliens came to the shelter. Not guards, not soldiers, just men with hard eyes and cruel smiles. They slammed their fists against the door, their voices rough. "Human, bring her out. She's ours, not yours." The girl froze in fear, her trembling hand clutching the human's sleeve. Her body shook so badly she could barely breathe. He stood slowly, pushing her gently behind him. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice firm but calm. Then he turned to the door, opening it just enough to step outside. The 3 aliens sneered at him, circling like hungry predators. "You insulted us all," one spat. "You think you're better than us, keeping that trash alive?" She was meant to be sport, not a burden. Another leaned closer, his teeth sharp, his breath foul. "Give her to us, and maybe we'll let you live." The human's hand tightened around the knife at his side. His eyes were calm, but inside his chest his heart thundered. He knew if he fought here others would come, but he also knew he could not give her up. "She's not yours," he said, his voice steady. "She's not trash. She's a life, and I won't hand her over." For a moment the alley went silent. Then the aliens burst into laughter, cruel and loud. "You'll die for her then," one snarled, raising a jagged blade. But before the first strike could land, footsteps echoed from deeper in the street. A shout rang out, "Enough!" Everyone froze. From the shadows stepped another alien, older, his face lined with scars. He was no noble, no soldier, but his presence was strong, his eyes sharp with anger. "Go back," he barked at the 3 men. "You make too much noise." "And not all of us wish to bow to the nobles' games," the 3 aliens growled. But after a tense moment they retreated, throwing hateful glances at the human. "This isn't over," one spat before disappearing into the dark. The older alien turned to the human, his voice lower now. "You're making enemies fast, stranger." The human met his gaze, unmoving. "I didn't come here to make friends," he said quietly. The older alien gave a bitter smile. "Maybe not, but you've lit a fire, whether you meant to or not. Some see what you did and it gives them courage, but courage invites blood." The human said nothing. He only closed the door again, returning inside where the girl waited, her wide eyes full of fear and questions. She whispered, "They will kill you because of me." He shook his head, kneeling down beside her. "No," he said softly. "They will try to kill me, because I refuse to be like them." Her breath caught, her hands shaking as she gripped his arm. "Why? Why risk your life for me?" He looked into her trembling eyes. "Because if no one risks anything, nothing changes." She did not understand fully, but his words sank into her heart. For the first time in years, she felt a spark inside her chest, something faint, fragile, but alive. That night, as the girl lay down again, the human sat awake. From outside, faint murmurs reached his ears, whispers carried on the wind. Some voices cursed his name, others spoke it with awe, and in those whispers, he realized something dangerous. This was no longer about just him and the girl. The city itself was stirring. Some wanted him dead. Others wanted to see if he could stand. And somewhere in between, rebellion whispered quietly, waiting to be born. The human tightened his grip on the knife, his jaw set. The storm was coming, and he would face it, because now he carried more than a broken girl in his arms. He carried the hope she had never been allowed to hold, and hope was something worth bleeding for. The night after the whispers spread, the city no longer felt the same. Shadows moved differently. Voices carried sharper tones, and every echo outside the human's shelter made his grip on the knife tighten. The alien girl sat near the wall, her small hands wrapped around her knees, her eyes flicking to him every few breaths. She could feel it too, the air heavy with danger. She whispered, "They are coming, aren't they?" The human nodded slowly. Yes, soon. He had been a soldier once, long before this strange city, long before he had stumbled into their cruel games. He knew the rhythm of tension, the silence before a strike. And tonight, that silence wrapped around them like a noose. The door rattled first, softly, almost like the wind. Then again, harder, followed by a heavy fist slamming against the wood. "Human!" A voice barked, thick with command. "Open the door. The girl belongs to us. You have one chance to live. Give her up." The girl's breath caught, her fingers digging into the mat, her eyes filled with terror. The human stepped in front of her, his shoulders firm, his voice calm. "She belongs to no one," he answered through the door. "Leave us?" A low chuckle came from the other side, cold and merciless. "Then die with her." The door burst open with a crack, splinters flying. 3 armored enforcers stormed in, their eyes glowing faint under their helmets, jagged blades in their hands. The girl screamed softly, shrinking back. The human stepped forward, knife in hand, his heart pounding. He was outnumbered, but his stance was steady. The first enforcer lunged, swinging wide. The human ducked low, the blade whistling over his head. He slashed upward, his knife cutting across the alien's arm. A howl echoed, sharp and furious. The second enforcer moved fast, kicking the human in the side, slamming him against the wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but he pushed off, refusing to fall. The girl's voice broke through the chaos, trembling but desperate. "Please, stop." Her words went unheard, drowned in the clash of steel and fury. The third enforcer raised his weapon high, aiming for her instead of him. The human's blood ran cold. He threw himself forward, tackling the alien to the ground. The blade clattered against the floor, missing her by inches. The girl gasped, frozen in terror, her body pressed against the corner. The fight turned brutal, close, and desperate. The human's knife was small, his strength less than theirs. But he fought with a fire none of them had. Every strike he made was not for himself. It was for the fragile life trembling behind him. He blocked one strike with his arm, pain ripping through his skin, but he ignored it, driving his knife into the first enforcer's leg. The alien roared and stumbled, crashing against the broken wall. The second swung again, the blade slicing across the human's shoulder. Blood splattered, hot and sharp. The girl cried out, tears streaming, her hands clutching at the floor as though wishing she could help. Her voice cracked. "Don't die. Please don't die." Those words burned into him, a plea heavier than any weapon. He forced himself up, his breath ragged. With a surge of strength, he drove his knife into the second enforcer's chest, pushing until the alien collapsed, lifeless. The last enforcer staggered back, fury in his eyes. He looked at the girl, then at the human. "This is not over," he hissed. "More will come. She will never be safe." Then he turned and fled into the night, his heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Silence fell, broken only by the girl's quiet sobs. The human leaned against the wall, his body trembling, blood soaking his sleeve. He looked at her, his chest heaving. But when he saw her alive, still breathing, still clinging to hope, he managed a faint smile. "It's over. For now," he whispered. She crawled to him, her small hands pressing against his wounds. Tears falling freely. "You're hurt." "Because of me," she cried. He shook his head weakly. "No, because of them." but as long as I'm alive, they won't touch you." Her hands shook as she tried to stop the bleeding. She had no skill, no training, but her heart drove her to try. In that moment, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she wasn't only the one being saved. She wanted to save him too. Outside, the city stirred again. The whispers grew louder, darker. The human killed enforcers. Some said with shock, "He's protecting the broken girl," others murmured. And hidden in the shadows, those who had once been silent felt something rise within them. A dangerous thought. If one man could stand against them, maybe others could too. But for the human and the girl, the night was not victory. It was only survival. The real threat had only just begun, and they both knew it. The shelter smelled of blood and smoke. The broken door hung loose, splinters scattered across the floor. The human sat against the wall, his arm bleeding, his breath ragged. The alien girl knelt beside him, pressing strips of cloth against his wounds with trembling hands. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice tried to be steady. "You can't stay here, they will come again and with more." He nodded slowly, his jaw set. "I know," he whispered. His eyes moved to the door, to the dark streets beyond. The city was no longer a cage. It was a hunting ground, and they were the prey. The girl shivered, her thin shoulders shaking. "Where will we go?" He looked at her, his gaze firm despite the pain. "Somewhere they cannot find you." But in his heart, he knew nowhere was safe. Not while the nobles still ruled. Yet he would rather die moving than wait to be crushed before dawn. They gathered what little they had. A torn blanket, scraps of food, a cracked water jug, and his knife. The human wrapped his wounded arm tight with cloth, ignoring the sting. The girl clutched the blanket, her eyes darting to every sound outside. Together they slipped into the streets. The city was quiet. Too quiet. Lanterns flickered weakly, casting long shadows. Here and there voices echoed, soldiers patrolling, searching. "Find them," one growled in the distance. "They cannot escape." The girl pressed close to him, her breath shallow. Fear pressed heavy on her chest, but his steady hand on her back kept her moving. Step by step they made their way through narrow alleys, past crumbling walls. Every noise made them freeze. Every shadow felt like eyes. At the edge of the city, the walls rose tall and cracked. Beyond them lay ruins, forests, and the unknown. To most, leaving the city was madness. Outside meant hunger, beasts, and death. But to the human, outside meant freedom. "Can you climb?" he whispered, pointing to the broken stones. The girl swallowed, nodding though her legs shook. I will try." He helped her first, boosting her up the wall. Her hands scraped against the stone, her breath sharp with effort. But she reached the top, trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief. No one had ever let her climb. No one had ever given her the chance to go beyond. For a moment she looked out at the dark horizon, the ruins stretching under the fading stars. It was terrifying, yet it was also the first sight of something not chained, not caged. "Go," he urged. She climbed down the other side, landing unsteadily. He followed, his injured arm making every grip burn with pain, but he forced himself over, landing hard beside her. Together they ran into the night, leaving the city's hateful walls behind. The wilderness greeted them with silence. Tall ruins stood like broken teeth, vines crawling over stone. The wind whistled through empty arches, carrying the cries of distant beasts. The girl clung to his sleeve, her body trembling. "Is it safe?" she whispered. He looked around, scanning the shadows. "No, but it's safer than back there." They found shelter in the ruins of an old tower, its roof long gone. Inside, broken stones made a rough circle, enough to hide them from view. The human lowered himself against the wall, his body aching. The girl sat close, pulling the torn blanket over them both. The night was cold, the ground hard, but for the first time she was not locked behind bars. She looked at him, her voice soft. "You left the city, for me." He met her gaze, his eyes tired but unyielding. "I left the city for us." Her chest tightened, her throat burning with unspoken words. She lowered her head, whispering, "I don't deserve this." His hand rested gently on her shoulder. "You deserve more than this, you just don't believe it yet." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time she did not hide them. For the first time she let them fall. She leaned closer, her small frame resting against him. Her voice, barely a breath, "Then I'll try to believe because you do." Outside the ruins, the city still surged. Torches lit the night, soldiers shouting, their boots striking the streets. But they would not find them here, not yet. The whispers inside the city grew louder. The human defied them. He killed their enforcers. He fled with the broken girl. Some spat curses. Others felt a strange stirring in their hearts. The rebellion was no longer just a whisper. It was beginning to breathe. In the ruins, the girl finally drifted to sleep, her head against his shoulder. The human stayed awake, his knife in his hand, his eyes scanning the shadows. Every cry of a beast, every rustle of leaves made his muscles tense. But when he looked at her sleeping face, no longer twisted in fear but soft, almost peaceful, he felt his pain ease, if only a little. The flight had begun. They were hunted now, but they were free. And though the wilderness was filled with danger, he knew one truth. As long as he drew breath, he would fight to keep that fragile spark of hope alive. For her, for himself, and maybe for something greater. The ruins were cold and silent, but silence never lasted long. The human knew it. The girl felt it. And the wind itself carried the warning. They were not safe. No matter how far they ran, the city would not let them go. The nobles could not allow defiance to stand, and tonight the hunt would end. He stood at the broken arch of the ruined tower, his knife in hand, his wounded arm bandaged tight. Every muscle ached, every breath burned, but his eyes remained sharp. Behind him, the girl crouched low, clutching the torn blanket around her small frame. Her pale violet eyes shimmered in the moonlight, wide with both fear and determination. She whispered, "They're coming, aren't they?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. They'll be here soon." And they came. First the sound of boots crunching stone, then the glow of torches cutting. Through the darkness, voices shouted, harsh and mocking. There, in the ruins, the human and his broken pet. Dozens of soldiers stepped into the clearing, armored and armed. Their leader, tall and broad, stepped forward, his voice booming. "Hand over the girl, human. You've caused enough trouble. End it now and we'll make your death quick." The girl trembled, her body pressed against the wall. She clutched his sleeve, her whisper breaking. "You can't fight them all." The human turned to her, his gaze steady. "I don't need to fight them all," he said quietly. "I just need to stand long enough for you to see. You're worth standing for." Her throat tightened, her eyes filling with tears. She shook her head, whispering, "No. Not just me. Us. If you fall, I fall too." For the first time, she rose to her feet, weak but firm, standing beside him instead of behind. Her small hands clenched, her trembling frame refusing to hide. The soldiers laughed at the sight. "She stands with him?" One jeered, "She thinks she's more than trash now?" Their cruel voices echoed, but for once the girl did not shrink. She looked at them, her voice shaking but loud enough. "I am not trash," she said. Her words cut through the laughter, and for a moment, even the soldiers stilled. The human felt pride stir in his chest. Her first defiance, her first spark of fire. Then the storm broke. The soldiers charged, blades flashing, torches blazing. The human pushed the girl back just enough to shield her, then stepped forward, knife raised. The clash was fierce, brutal, desperate. He ducked one strike, slashed another, his body moving with the instincts of survival. But he was only one man, and they were many. The girl screamed his name, her voice raw with terror. She grabbed a broken stone from the ground, her hands shaking. When one soldier lunged toward him, she hurled the stone with all her strength. It struck the soldier's head, not enough to kill, but enough to stagger him. The human seized the chance, driving his knife into the soldier's throat. For the first time they fought together, but blood flowed. The human's shoulder tore open from a slash, his leg buckled under a heavy kick. Still, he refused to fall. Every time he thought his strength might end, he heard her voice. "Don't. Stop, please don't stop." And he rose again, his knife flashing in the moonlight. The leader finally stepped forward, his blade longer, sharper, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you can change anything, human? She is nothing, and you will die for nothing." He swung his blade in a wide arc, forcing the human back. The human stumbled, his breath ragged, his knife nearly slipping from his hand. The girl's heart pounded, panic and courage colliding. Inside her, she looked around, her eyes falling on a broken spear half buried in the rubble. She grabbed it, dragging it with all her strength. Her voice broke as she shouted, "He is not alone." She thrust the spear forward as the leader swung again. The tip scraped across his armor, not deep but enough to distract him. The human surged forward in that instant, driving his knife into the leader's chest with all his strength. The blade sank deep, the leader's eyes wide with shock. He staggered, coughed, and collapsed, his torch falling to the ground. The other soldiers froze, staring at their fallen commander. The human stood over him, blood dripping, his chest heaving. The girl stood beside him, the broken spear still in her shaking hands. Together they faced the soldiers, not broken, not begging, standing. The silence stretched. Then one soldier hissed, "This isn't over." They retreated into the night, their torches vanishing one by one. The ruins grew quiet again. The human dropped to his knees, his strength finally failing. The girl caught him, her thin arms wrapping around him. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was fierce. "You can't die. You can't leave me. You fought for me. Now I'll fight for you." He looked at her, his eyes heavy, a faint smile on his lips despite the pain. "You're not broken anymore," he whispered. "You're free." Her tears fell onto his bloodied hand, her heart breaking yet burning, with resolve because she knew now. Freedom was not given, it was taken, and it was worth every wound. And no matter what came next, she would never be the girl left in the dirt again. Together, they had stood, and together, they had changed everything.